Hello and welcome to Board Game Bonkers. I'm Jay Sears, and under the Meeple light today, we have Alex Radcliffe from BoardGameCo. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, how's it going? How's your day going so far?
Oh, it's been amazing. Thank you for asking, and it's great to have you on. So, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. How much is a lot? We can keep going, but I'll try to keep it short and to the point. I'm Alex Radcliffe. I run a channel called BoardGameCo. I'm also CMO of GameFound. I've been playing board games since I want to say 2011, and I've had a very long and interesting journey throughout, both as a hobbyist as well as dabbling in various aspects of the business space. And around 2019, I started a YouTube channel, and I've just been having a lot of fun living a life where I get to talk about board games and have people want to hear me talk about board games, which is never once the life I thought I'd lead, but that's where we are at the moment.
Well, you said had a great achievement with it, and a lot of people love your channel. So, what we'll do, we'll put the link in the description down below, just in case people have been living under a rock and not familiar with who you are and what your channel's all about. So, let's just explain what this is about for our viewers out there who are not quite familiar. Perhaps they've missed season one. Well, shame on you. You can go back and actually watch recordings if you like. But what we're doing is drawing 10 questions from this ball. But we're going to do a lot of different. The last question, instead of being the 10th, is actually going to be drawn for one of these scenarios. Now, our guest has no idea what the scenarios are or what the questions are. So, our guest, are you going to be polite? So, will it be a little bit nervous? We're about to find out as we present 10 questions to our guest. So, Alex, are you ready?
How ready can one be for something that they haven't prepared for? I have done zero preparing, and I'm ready to be not ready.
Let's dive into it. Let's get on to question one. So I think in this season, I think the question's a little bit more fluffy than season one. We've got a few tough ones. Let's see what comes out this time around. So what's the best piece of advice you can give someone?
Period, with no caveats whatsoever.
It could be any advice. So let's say someone started off is to be a content creator. What's one bit of strong advice you would give someone?
Oh, so if we're narrowing it down to that genre, I have so many fun things I could do. But if we're narrowing it down to becoming a content creator, I would say that the best thing is to define what your goals are and what success looks like for you. It's very easy to dive into the content creator space, and it's a lot of fun to be in the content creator space. But it's important to define what you're doing and why you're doing it to understand whether you're actually achieving your goals. And your goals could be anything. Your goals could be having fun. Your goals could be talking to companies whose games you've appreciated. Your goals could be views or a full-time job. But ultimately, if you just walk in doing, then without knowing what success looks like, you also don't know what failure looks like. And I think it's important to know for yourself why you're doing it and set realistic goals as well while you're at it. Knowing while you're doing it is great, but if you're doing it so you could have 1 million subscribers, maybe the board game space is not the right space for you. And so there's all these different conversations around what you're doing and why you're doing it. But I think a big part is just knowing for yourself what your goals are, being willing to adapt and adjust those goals. I'm not saying that your goals from day one. Your goal day one might be, I want to film videos. That might be your goal. You want to film a video a week. That could be your goal. And as time goes on, your goal might change to, I want to do this full time, or I just want to, be invited to a board convention. This could be any number of things. It's fine to iterate or adjust your goals, but understand what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, that's great advice, and certainly it has to be a purpose, doesn't that? And it's about keeping it realistic as well, isn't it? And like you say, if you're aiming for 1 million views or 1 million subscribers, that's probably not going to happen. We're not all Mr. Beast out there, so it's about being realistic, and like you say, having goals gives you that purpose.
Yeah, totally agree.
So let's move on to question number two. So a good start, Alex. Something a little bit soft. So let's see if there are any tough ones come out. So, will we see modern games on supermarket shelves in the near future? Now, we know in America and in the States, in particular, we have like the Target that have lots of great choices in games. Now, in the UK, it's very much the opposite. So, in terms of generalizing here, we're talking about where you come from, Alex. Will we see more supermarkets shelving more board games?
Specifically supermarkets or general big box stores?
I think we'll stick with supermarkets because generally when you go to a supermarket, well, certainly in the old days you'd pick up food, but then grocery items, but these days you can pick up pretty much anything.
Yeah. So I'd say that I think that in general, we are seeing, again, this is a US based answer, but we are generally seeing a shift towards the types of places that stock and supply modern board games. It used to be your only options were a hobbyist store online, and now you can walk into Target, into Walmart, into Barnes and Nobles, or any of these places, and there are plenty of hobbyist board games available, and the supply is only growing to the point that we're seeing companies engage with specific, not the exclusives, seeing them engage with exclusives in order to be able to get that next game. We had Parks, an incredibly popular game, and Target contracted to get Trails. We had Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, which was a Target exclusive for like 6 months. People forget about that, but for 6 months, you could only get Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion at Target. And these are companies that are saying, hey, we're seeing a rising trend and we want to pull people into our stores. Now, as far as expanding outwards even further in terms of how many popular games there are or the types of stores that carry them, I think the short answer is yes. How soon, how fast, that's a bit of a different conversation, but it's not in any way unreasonable to think that as stores stock any number of different peripheral items, you may start to see small box games showing up at any different place on the shelves. I think depending on the store, it might come down to like small box, more novelty items, a dash of no thanks, a hint of code names, a little bit of Coloretto, coloring the aisle shelves around you as things that you can pick up while you're there. You can pick up, your groceries, your food, an umbrella, a little bit of coal for the fireplace, and also grab code names while you're at it. It's not unreasonable to have that in additional shelf appeal. Board games have an edge over video games in the sense they have that perception of being very family oriented. So you might be less likely to throw a copy of Call of Duty on the checkout aisle. I might be a drop more likely to throw whatever small box game, a little bit of timelines or monikers gracing the aisle. So I think yes, the only question is just how fast and what types of games that I don't know, but we're definitely seeing the continued growth and expansion of the hobby.
Yeah, and it's certainly great to see more than just Monopoly. Connect 4 and Clue, and it's great to expand on that. And it's a shame the UK hasn't followed suit with the US because we're still very much behind. If I see another Orchard game on shelf or another Monopoly, I think I'm going to go crazy because there's a lack of that in terms of diversity of games in supermarket shelves in the UK. And I know in some parts of Europe, actually, it's taken a similar feat to what the US is doing and what supermarket shelf a good range of board games that just isn't transparent into some other countries around the world. So I'm sure this trend will continue to grow and hopefully it does.
Yeah.
So let's move on to question number 3. Well, we could have a crystal ball and tell us what's happening in the future. Trying to get mine, that'll be a bit scary, I think, as well. So, from your board game collection, Alex, which game would your family members choose to play? So let's just say you've got some family gathering for some kind of event. Which game would your family love to play?
Ooh. So again, it depends a bit. If we're moving outside immediate family and into like, siblings and parents and that kind of situation, as opposed to kids or wife or all that, if we're moving into that kind of range, my family definitely they appreciate strategy games, but they appreciate strategy games that are playable in under the hour range. We like things that are a lot of fun to dive into, but also being accessible. So games like Small World, games like Seven Wonders or Stone Age, or possibly even party game adjacent games like Monikers are all up for grabs. I'm trying to think of a recent one that would definitely be a popular one in my family. A recent popular one probably would be Istanbul. Istanbul tends to land fairly well as being a good midweight strategy game that plays in a relatively accessible time frame. So let's pick Istanbul if we had to pick one.
Well, I certainly love Small World. Actually, that was one of my very first board games I actually played in the modern world, and I still have it,
Likewise.
and I will continue to keep it. And
Small World, I credit Stone Age and Small World as being the stepping stones. Not to say I didn't play other games. I played games like Catan, I played games like Carcassonne, but the one-two punch that kind of brought me from I've played games to actually exploring was I played Stone Age, and then 3 months later I played Small World, and I was like, that's two games back to back that I've played that I didn't know existed, and I started searching out a lot of things, including every last expansion for Small World.
I'm definitely with you on that one. So let's move on to question number 4, Alex. Let's give this a little shuffle. All right, question 4. So what was the biggest turning point in the board game industry? So what do you think was that little point in the board game industry that things have really turned for the good?
Uh, You said turning point, then you added further good. I was about to answer Alien Frontiers or Zombicide. I think that those are two games. Alien Frontiers and Zombicide are the two games that are often credited with the shift to board game crowdfunding. I believe Alien Frontiers was the first game to like do particularly well across like $50,000 in crowdfunding, which was insane. It was a whole market that people didn't really know but existed and tapped into. And then Zombicide was the first game to really leverage stretch goals in a way that brought you like I don't remember if it crossed a million or if it was 500,000 or something, but it was the first campaign that really went from like just took off because of the nature of stretch goals. And I think that board game crowdfunding is a huge part of the board game ecosystem for better and for worse. It's not so clear. I think there's a lot of good, and I think there's a lot of not so good mixed in. If I had to overall pick, I would say it's for the good, but it definitely comes with caveats and asterisks and things along the way. And so I think that Alien Frontiers and Zombicide, I believe those are 2010 and 2012, respectively, if I'm not mistaken, but that would be a huge shift that we have simply not come back from.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. And Alien Frontier is a fantastic game. I still have it in my collection, and I'll keep having it. I mean, the first time I played that, I was just so enthusiastic, and I immediately went out and bought it. And I always continue. And certainly, that was one of the very first of getting it into crowdfunding, and actually did so well. It just created this opening for others to take part in it. And like you say, there's some fantastic elements to crowdfunding, and some challenges and barriers to it as well.
Yeah.
We'll see what the future holds. So let's move on to the next question, number 5, Alex. So in question 5, do you work better with or without music? So
I tend to work best without other distractions, but it doesn't mean that I don't like other distractions. I tend to have either music playing in the background or a TV show playing in the background at any given time, but I find that it's paused as often as it's not. I like that background, again, whether it's music or a show, I like having it in the background. And suddenly, before you know it, I'm reading an email or drafting a video in some way that requires that extra level of focus. In my case, there's also video editing, and that's obviously harder to do when you have audio in the background. So there are definitely things that get in the way of having those shows at any given time, or music for that matter, at any given time. But I would say I appreciate what it does. I like it. It's constantly present. And then just as often, I have to hit pause until I'm done with the next thing that requires my attention.
and there's certainly a lot of research out there that actually shows people work better when there's less distractions, and that includes noise. But I suppose it depends on the task you're doing as well, doesn't it, Alex? I mean, if you're walking around the house, then having music on or the TV in the background might be great. It might motivate you to do more. But if you concentrate on a specific task, sometimes silence is the best productivity in terms of getting work done.
Yeah, 100%.
So let's move on to question number 6. So I think they've been kind with you, Alex. We've had some nice questions. We haven't had too many tough ones. So question 6. So which character from a board game would you want by your side during a zombie apocalypse?
So characters in board games are interesting because one area that board games have not really caught up with traditional, either TV, movies, or video games for that matter, is the idea of having characters that you resonate with. They certainly exist, but perhaps I mean it's not even because you're playing as the character. In video games, you're playing as the character, and so many people have fond memories of any number of characters from Link to Kyle Katarn to Huna to Mario. Characters in video games are very much present and identifiable. Characters in board games, they're not quite as there. And I'm having a hard time even thinking. You'd have to think of games like ISS Vanguard or Tainted Grail of various specific highlights who are along the way. So if we're talking a zombie apocalypse, instinctively, I do want to move to a zombicide character, but I really don't have. Weirdly enough, Cthulhu Death May Die has a handful of characters that I appreciate more. I don't remember the names, but the Burning Girl, there's oh my gosh, I can't remember any of the names. So this is a tough one because I'm not going to have any good answers. Zombie apocalypse. I'm not going to choose a specific character, but I'll go with a paladin from Massive Darkness. I can't remember the name, but Massive Darkness 2 has a few paladins. I'm going to pick one of them. I think they probably have enough something to ward off the waves of the enemies.
I think for myself, I'd go with Conan. I think something a little bit different, and I'm sure he'd be chopping a few bodies apart with his muscles, but...
Machete. I'll take Machete. Machete. There's a Zombicide 2 has a Machete character. I'll take him.
some massacre mayhem going on there. So let's move on to the next question, Alex. We're on to number 7. So let's give this a little shuffle. Let's see what comes out. So question 7 is, what's the most challenging thing about turning an idea for what you do for your shows into reality? So you've probably got lots of different ideas, and what does it actually take to turn that in to an actual productivity and end product?
You're just talking about going from idea to execution.
Exactly.
So it very often depends on the type of video I'm doing. There's multiple different steps along the way, but I think the first step in general, just going through the entire production cycle, the first step is idea. Sometimes it's simply as simple as a review, and sometimes it's like what a top 10 list will be or what a topical conversation will be. From there, drafting out the notes of the next step, whether it's the pros and cons in a review, whether it's the 10 games, trying to think through there, or whether it's a discussion point and trying to think through what are the bullet points I want to hit in the conversation I want to have. I think that then from there, it's obviously filming and editing and all that. So I think the most challenging part is when I'm tackling a topical conversation, whatever that topical conversation might be, even referencing this own conversation. I remember when Jaws of the Lion was at Target, there were a lot of people who were scalping it from Target, who were buying it, snatching up limited copies to turn around and sell it for double the price because everyone wanted Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. I remember I put out a video talking about, is scalping wrong or not wrong? What are the thoughts behind it? Is it actually doing a disservice or not? And I put out a video trying to address that topic because it was a hot topic. I think the most challenging part is when you're trying to embrace a topical conversation, trying to think through all the counter viewpoints that will inherently be present. As a viewer, if you're watching somebody talk about a heated subject, you don't just want to hear them talk about the heated subject. You also want to be able to have your own opinion thrown into the mix. And because of the nature of the fact that a video is very one way and it's not actually a conversation, you kind of want to be able to take those viewpoints almost in anticipation to be able to say, oh yes, here's a viewpoint, and also you might say this or this, and here's how I would respond and engage with those, either to give them credence or to offer up a counter viewpoint. And you want to continue down that rabbit hole. Effectively, you need to be not just the voice of yourself, but to a certain extent the voice of your audience, which is almost impossible. You can cover a lot of areas, and I will try to cover a lot of areas, but inherently there'll always be that one point where somebody says, but what about this? And you may even have an answer, but you can't answer every single comment. And so trying to encapsulate the entire conversation and not just the singular viewpoint you start with, that's probably the most challenging aspect in those topical conversations.
Yeah, you certainly hit on the nail there. It's almost impossible to get every single viewpoint, isn't it, and a topic of discussion, because everyone has their own opinion, and you hope that you just cover everything to try and make it a fair, balanced viewpoint. And I think you do a really grand job of doing that, Alex.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Can't be easy, that's for sure.
It's impossible. Everyone, because there's going to be the things you didn't think of, and then the things that there's so much out there, and it's trying to have a conversation. Rodney Smith of Watch It Play always had a phenomenal series called Table Talk and Table Talk Back, where he would both have an opinionated conversation and then respond to the comments. But even then, it's still not a perfect answer, because then there's answers to the Table Talk Back. There's even answers further. And so realistically, the only way to properly have a conversation is to actually have a conversation. But every platform has its own pros and cons, and there's only so much you can really do with a video to your audience.
Yes, I absolutely, completely agree with that. And that may be something we tap into at some point, but we'll see. We'll see what the future brings. So let's move on to our next question. We're on to I think we're on number 8, yes. So we're almost there. So what's your most recent favorite board gaming memory?
Ooh, my most recent favorite board game memory. There's a lot to pick from, like a lot. And so I'm just gonna pick out one that particularly stood out. But it was a game of Veiled Fate from Ivy Games, and it specifically was a team-based game. And there were 6 players, I believe, and teams of 3 teams of 2. And the problem with Veiled Fate is you don't actually know who your teammate is, and so you're working together to achieve your team's objectives without knowing who your teammate is. And as we approached the end game, there were 2 players who were so clearly on the same team. They were very clearly on the same team. They were working together, and they were starting to get to the point where they're talking to each other. And one of them was like, "No, I'm gonna do this, and I'll help us." One of those, "No, don't, I got this. I'm telling you, let me take care of this. I got this. It's totally fine." And they let the other person take control, and the other person went ahead and did what they needed to do to win. And as they turned around and won, they all revealed their cards, and those two people were not on the same team. And so the person A, let person B take control and win, but person B was actually winning with person C, and person A lost because they completely, and no one saw it coming. Everyone at the table, they all thought they were on the same team. The way they were acting, the way they were operating, they 100% thought they were on the same team, and they weren't. And so it changes the entire conversation of the way the whole game just like completely blew up. People like left the room, walked out. It was absolutely insane. A very intense conversation.
Yeah, and you certainly get a lot of that from hidden role games as well, and in terms of the dynamics that can change from game to game. And I'm sure there's lots of stories selling similar concepts, and that's happened. And it gets people talking, doesn't it? And thinking, why didn't I see that coming?
Yeah, very much so. It's a lot.
So let's move on to our next question. So we're on to number 9. Well, we can't get this one open. This one starts it says, "Don't open me." But this is a good one. I like this one. If you can have one superpower for a day, what would it be, and what would you use it for?
Ooh. Invisibility and flying are the two most common answers when somebody asks what superpower they're given. And they're in theory great, but the problem with being invisible is what are you actually going to do with it that's not in some sense crime oriented. Flying sounds very cool. The problem with that is, I don't know about you, but if you've ever engaged like if you ever engaged in any form of improvement in your transportation, going back a step is very hard, whether you got a nicer car or even just the first time you drove a car, going back to it. So I think flying would be very, very fun, but I'd be left wanting to fly forever. Mind reading is a scary one because mind reading could give you that opportunity to really dive into understanding what people think of you, which you could use as a strong sense of self-improvement. And having it only for a day is a good thing, but you would have to be mentally strong because you do not want to hear every passing thought of what a person thinks. People are very polite and they often express the emotions that rise to the surface, but it's so easy for anyone at any point to think the worst possible things about you. So mind reading is very tempting. The only question is, am I strong enough to use it only for self-improvement and not to let it crush my spirit? And super speed has the same issue with flying. Laser sight has the same issue of invisibility. Like, are you using these things for good, for help? What are you doing with these things? I guess I'm going to give a lame answer. I'm going to cheat and just give the lamest answer. The ability to see the future so that I can pick whatever lottery numbers I need and live in financial security for the rest of my life.
That is cheating.
That is cheating. If we're going for something a little bit more noble, I'll go with the mind reading one. But the mind reading one is scary. The idea of hearing everything, it could be used for vast forms of self-improvement, but it could also crush your spirit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that'd be scary. I don't think I'd want that, to be honest. I think it'd be I think anxiety would hit the roof with a lot of people. So.
It's just for a day. It's just for a day. It helps that I already wasn't liked in high school, so I'm used to dealing with the hate. Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of love in the board game community, so let's hope that continues, Alex. So we're on to our last question, but this time we're going to be taking it from one of these, which is going to be a scenario. So I'm just going to randomly take one. I have no idea what it is. In fact, I can't even remember what they are. So our scenario then, Alex, is what do you think the next best or biggest thing to come out of the board game industry will be?
That's tricky. It's always hard to know. If I knew the answer, I mean, people would be paying me a lot of money. That's another way to make money. Legacy games never really saw their full shot. Campaign games did to an extent, but there's still a small subset of the space. But big box miniature campaign games certainly exist. We're currently in. We saw a print and play renaissance. We saw a roll and write renaissance, and then now we're seeing a print and play roll and write renaissance on top of that. And those are things that already exist strongly. It's very hard to know the trends of what's happening next. You almost have to look at what's currently happening and try to see what's going to be expanded upon. So I think the thing that we're currently seeing happening, and it's currently, it's not whatever, but we are seeing a gigantic merging of licenses, chasing licenses left, right, and center. And licenses always existed, but the degree and speed to which they are being picked up, whether it's a Smurfs board game that was just announced, whether it's every single video game, Call of Duty and Apex Legends and Dead Cells and every single video game under the sun, Stalker, every single video game is being turned into a board game right now. I think that's going to be the next continued trend. And I think it's going to last a long time. We've seen this in every single space, whether it's video games, whether it's Lego, whether it's a Playmobil, every single toy eventually hits that licensing point where you start cross promoting with, it's not enough to have, medieval Lego, you want to have Lord of the Rings Lego. And you have those aspects where people try to take advantage of something that has an existing audience and merges it with fans of an existing product to try to bring as much of that to the table. And the increasing rise of board games means that we start to see that being a huge trend over the past year or so, maybe a year or 2 years, and it's only continuing to grow. There's a thing called the Licensing Expo, which is a convention I never really heard of until this past year. But the convention is literally just about licensing. It's a place you go to try to find licenses for a thing. It's a convention that's all about, hey, you're selling the Star Wars license? Excellent. I do board games. Can I have the Star Wars license for board games? It's literally people going to sell licenses and find people who want to use that license and find that product target audience match. And it's something that I never knew existed until this past year, because who knows? But this past year, like 15 people I'm friends with on Facebook were all going to the Licensing Expo. And it's not that the Licensing Expo is new, it's that the degree of shift we're seeing in board games towards the adoption of licenses is growing at an exponential rate. And for years, we've seen it with certain licenses. Sure, we've seen Warhammer, we've seen Star Wars, we've seen Marvel. For years, we've seen certain licenses. But the speed at which licenses are being picked up and distributed in the board game space is accelerating drastically and is only going to continue to do so. It's going to be a big part of the board game space.
Yeah, certainly IPs will become a big thing, and I've been discussing a lot of game designers, and incidentally, a lot of them are working on IPs, so that's quite interesting. It'll be fun to see what's coming out. And I have a view on that, but I won't share it here. But will be interested to see what comes out in the future, Alex. So that brings us to the end of this show, and I'd like to just thank our guest Alex for joining us and giving us some insight into his life as well. I think it's great to share that and his viewpoint and things. And I'd also like to thank our viewers as well. If you haven't already done so, please like that video and consider subscribing to the channel. There's more content like this popping up on your feed, otherwise you'll miss out. And please get involved as well. Let us know in the comments down below what your particular highlights were from today's show, and let us know about the new setup as well. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on where you would like to see us continue the show in the future. So until next time, take care.